Paul Slatkus, Good News Broadcast, speaking to Aaron Sherinian. Hi, Aaron. How are you?
Great. Good to be talking to you, and thanks for being part of what we see as an exciting week for the world.
Okay, it is an exciting. Well, so then let's put a date. First, let me say, today's the 15th of September, 2010, and Aaron is the Executive Director of Communications and Public Affairs for the United Nations Foundation. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's first start, because actually we've, over the years, I believe you guys started when, 1998, is it?
Correct. Mm-hmm. We were born with the historic, at that point, and still historic gift by Ted Turner of support for the United Nations through his funds that has grown into really support from a number of groups, leveraging other people's resources, ideas, and energy to support and solve global problems.
Well, about the UN, it says partnerships because we have learned what can be achieved when the public and the private sectors work together through the United Nations. And Ted obviously saw that. Ted is one of my heroes, actually, being in the 38 years in communications industry myself, and Ted actually has helped Good News Broadcast get started as well, and a lot of people around Ted, his family and friends, are friends of ours. So he's a big time hero for us, and congratulations on his restaurant and everything he does. He's magnificent. So well, let's go back. I mean, so 98. So that's 12 years. So. What has the UN Foundation, done many things, but what would you say is the basic premise here?
I think that the most important thing that the Foundation does and continues to do, and you'll see this happening next week as we move into these historic UN meetings, is to really build bridges with people. It's a phrase we use often because we build bridges with people to solve global problems. We believe that the UN is a place where international cooperation takes place. We believe that the UN has the reach and the ability to help solve global problems, and that by bringing people around the table together with their ideas, which matter, with their resources, which we need, and with their people who represent a diversity, a creativity that is needed to match these global problems, we can really get things done. Important examples are in the area of health. Polio was something that no one thought, wow, we can eradicate quickly. But through cooperation with the UN Foundation, support of the UN, polio is something that we're looking at eradicating in potentially our lifetime. Mm-hmm. Malaria was a scourge in Africa, continues to be a real global health concern. But with inviting people to do things with faith-based groups, through their service organizations, to give $10 to help send a net, an anti-malaria bed net to Africa, we're actually seeing progress in the fight against malaria. So these are just two small examples of areas where people can come together, they can do something that's within their own means, and they can help the UN fight these big problems that are not impossible ones, but they're big. When people come together, we can actually make progress on them.
I think one of the stories I did with you guys was one of Paul McCartney's former wife with landmines, and maybe Paul also. Does that recollect? You remember the desire to get rid of landmines out there. So in essence, I'm pretty sure it was you guys. I hope so. But why I'm bringing it up is that you take on issues, look at what you just said, polio and malaria. You take on issues, the UN Foundation takes on issues that are very, very important for the world.
And I think that's what we're going to see happening next week. Next week in New York City, world leaders are going to come together at the UN. They're going to converge on the city as they do, but this is different. World leaders are coming together because in 2000, the governments of the world came together at the UN and decided, let's set some goals for ourselves. Let's focus around some areas where we need help. They called them the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs as they're otherwise known by. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to be seeing happen next week is world leaders coming together to say, what progress have we made? What haven't we done, and where can we really move these big goals forward? Because they represent challenges in people's everyday lives. So it's not enough to talk about them in the esoteric or in the grand terminology. So let's really figure out what we can do to improve lives for people. So that's what we're going to see happen next week, and that's where we as the UN Foundation are so happy to see so much interest from everyday folks like you and me, people who realize that they have a network of friends, maybe friends on Facebook, people that we talk to in our communities, our church groups, people who always wanted to get involved on a global scale, and they can because the UN makes that possible. And I think that's what we're going to see happening next week. One thing that I think you'll find as you look at the headlines out of next week is that people are really concerned about women's health. That's my predictor for next week, is that you'll see through the leadership of the Secretary General and a bunch of really smart, innovative people from the corporate world and other folks, you're going to see them talking about how women's health connects everything together, whether it be climate, whether it be poverty, hunger, education. You really got to focus on women and children if you want to get to some of these problems. And that's where next week represents for us, it's a global moment of real importance, because we're 10 years into the goals. We have till 2015 to reach a number of them. We're not just doing it because it's an exercise, we're doing it because there are people's lives in the balance.
I've been wearing a Millennium Goals bracelet that Maradona gave me,
Right.
The UN is a wonderful organization, and I think unfortunately sometimes we don't learn that much about it and what's going on and how many countries are working together to solve concerns such as from what you speak about, and it doesn't sort of sometimes make the front page in the media. Just sometimes the tragic situations sometimes hit it, and here's a perfect example. It was started a long time ago, the Millennium Goals, and there's been progress that has occurred during this period, hasn't there been?
Absolutely. We've seen progress. The consensus is that we've got to keep moving. I mean, there's got to be momentum if we're going to hit some of these major targets. We're not as far along as we need to be on certain things. And the UN has been clear on that. I mean, the poverty targets are tricky because the world's had an economic hit in terms of the economy. We want to make sure that there's enough support for some of these programs. On education, we know that we've got to do more so that boys and girls around the world have education. When it comes to girls around the world, 600 million adolescent girls who don't have access to health or basic education, or are able to get the services that they need and want. So we know we've got to move forward. Even though there's been some progress, there's a lot more that needs to be done. You mentioned a good point, and I want to underscore it for the people who are going to be listening to us and getting this information. But not enough people know about it, but we've been surprised and happily surprised to see how many people are rallying. Just last week, I was in New York City, and I was able to see when issues about the Millennium Development Goals hit the screen on Times Square.
Oh, great.
That's one of the world's most famous billboards, right beneath the ball on Times Square. And thanks to Toshiba, who donated the space,
Right.
People are talking about it. There's
Good.
buzz, and I think people are sending their world leaders to New York with a message. And the message is, I care, I'm global, I want to support the UN, this stuff matters to me.
Unfortunately, it's such a tough town, this New York. There's just so much going on that, and good things that are happening that sometimes we don't know what's happening at the UN. It's like, you in your own neighborhood, you don't know what's happening at some points. And but worldwide, the UN is extremely more. People are really paying a lot of attention. Not that they're not here, but I don't know. It just seems like such a busy place. Don't you find that?
I think that everyone's life is hectic. I think that New York is kind of symbolizes what goes on everywhere around the world, and that it's a place with a lot going on. But people realize that this has an impact on us. It has an impact on me. If a girl in Uganda can't safely get access to water, that has an impact on me in Washington, D.C. or in California or wherever I am. And I think that you're seeing people now that the Internet is a part of our daily reality. People are connecting via the web on a way that they never have before. Not even when these goals were announced was the Internet such a daily part of our lives. And I think people really realize that this has an impact on our life here. If the world's going to be a stable place where everybody progresses and everyone can have an improved and better life for them and their family, it means everybody's got to have the same chances to get ahead.
Well, I'm betting my whole life, everything I got into that, because we started, on the Internet, web television, web broadcasting, thinking that, this is the next Gutenberg press, the Internet, and everybody in the world can see it, and we don't just need a TV station like when Ted started on the UHF and then worked his way into such a great media empire, well deserved. And now the world is watching and can watch all together now, very inexpensively, which is also another process of getting things to actually happen. And it's really all good. I'm looking at your website here, the United Nations Foundation, and I see you have tweeting and things. So how does someone get involved with the United Nations Foundation?
It's a great question, and let me tell you how they can do it. It's so easy, and it's free to get involved. We ask people to join us at www.unfoundation.org, where you can figure out a way on our website to get involved in advancing these MDGs. We actually have a to-do list. Ted Turner was, he's so involved in this issue. He's one of the Secretary General's advocates for these issues, and he said it to the world pretty simply. He said, this is your to-do list. The world's got a to-do list here. So check some stuff off so we can move towards these goals because they matter. So on the website, you're going to find ways that you can get involved. Some of them don't cost you $1. Some of them might invite you to make an investment into some of these programs. Some of them ask you to add your voice so that your government leaders, your world leaders, or your friends realize that these things matter. So there's different ways that people can get involved at unfoundation.org. You mentioned technology, and I want to say again, we think that this next week, one of the things that I'm most looking forward to this next week is when our founder and chairman, Ted Turner, will speak to a really interesting group of people at what's called the Social Good Summit. This is an event that's been organized with Mashable, one of the world's most important forces in terms of social media and the blog world, and the 92nd Street Y. And it's going to be a moment where he's going to talk to social media experts and people who are involved in technology on ways that they can get involved. We're opening up that space for the entire week to bloggers and people who are online journalists and thinkers to really send the message that this is not about a couple of people talking in one building at the UN. This is really a global conversation. Everything has gone digital, and the pulse is digital so that the solutions can also come from that world. So we're really excited to see that happen. That's why I think in so many ways it's going to be a historic meeting, and that's one way to show this is not business as usual for the UN Summit. This is business in a really savvy, technologically advanced way because we've got to use all this if we're going to get to the problems.
We're with you. It's a lot of good stuff. Be part of the solution, right?
Everyone has a role, and that means you and me. That means everyone in your community, and we're grateful for people who see the world as one big place and who realize that we're all here to help. So we thank you and your community for being part of this exciting week next week.
Okay, well, we will link over to unfoundation.org. And last question then for you. What's good news for you?
Good news is when people are talking. I think that I've seen that when people are actually talking about a problem, that's good news for me because they might not always agree, but the conversation is almost inevitably a net plus. I love that question because I see good news every time I see dialogue happening in our globe.